Okay, good morning. June 1st, unbelievable. You start buying, planning for Christmas. It's on its way. My goodness. Well, corn, we're not open yet, I guess. Corn is probably next week. All right, we'll open the meeting up. Public comments. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address the committee at this time? All right, seeing none, I'll move for approval of minutes.
So moved.
First, second. All in favor? Aye. Want to be involved in that vote?
Sure.
There you go.
Missed it by 30 seconds.
You did good. All right. Consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a first, have a second. Any discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? There we go. Did you get everything on who's first and second?
Yes.
All right. In the consent, we'll move into regular agenda items. Update, legislative.
Commissioners, I'm going to handle this for Lindsay. She's actually not here. She's on leave.
Right.
And so the baby was due a couple days ago, and so I've been texting her, and I don't think it's happened yet. So I said, normally CCTA is on time.
On budget.
And so something's happening here in the process. And apparently the first babies generally are late. I don't know that kind of technicality, but sometimes, okay. So I'm going to take the federal piece, and Mr. Watts is going to take the state piece. So let me go over it's in your packet, 6.2. We are making an application for the Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technology Deployment Program. I believe our ask is going to be for $12 million. It's to help seed our efforts to begin the journey down a path to fix the congestion on Interstate 680. And so that's a $350 million seven-pronged approach, and so we're going to ask for $12 million. We have to match 50%, so we have about $12 million in kind and actual revenues. And we're going in partnership this time. Instead of one California where there's 5 applications, MTC, Caltrans, and CCTA are going to move forward with this request. We've talked to Congressman DeSaulnier, who was in our office a couple of days ago, and asked for his support. And then we have Leader Pelosi's support. We sent the draft application to her chief of staff, and so hopefully we'll hear positive results on that. And then on the regulatory updates, President Trump issued the Buy America, Hire American amendment. So it really doesn't do a lot for us from the perspective of we have to buy American anyway, and if we don't have a certain item that we can't get in America, we have to go to USDOT, and generally in the days past, it's gone all the way to the deputy secretary level for a waiver. And generally, you don't get a waiver. And so we've been lucky on our highway projects. We haven't had to get involved in that. And then on the Hire American, it's really the responsibility of the contractor to hire Americans. And so they do all the labor compliance. We check to make sure the payroll is correct and those kinds of things. But overall, it's more, not really show, but it's hey, I want to hire Americans, and you've got to buy American. So it just reinforces that, which is already underway. Transition update, you can read that for yourselves. Alex Hergott, we have met with him several times on our trips back to Washington, D.C. He's been on the T&I side and on the EPW side. Now he was a staffer for INHOP, but he was at EPW. I like the guy. I've known him for a while. And so now he has a position for the Associate Director for Infrastructure at the Council of Environmental Quality. So hopefully we have a friend there, and we can pay him a visit in the future when we go back to Washington, D.C. So do you have any questions on the federal side?
I have one.
Sure.
Explain to me again, MTC. Okay, we're asking for $12 million. So what is the total sum that we're going to ask the feds for?
Well, currently on this ask, we can only ask for 12.
For all 3 agencies?
No, so it's going to be a co-application, but we're going to be the lead.
But how much? Okay, again.
So we're going to ask for $12 million, but MTC has a lot of money invested in Interstate 680 on the HOV lanes and other projects, and so it's really a good partnership. I like the arrangements that we have. We'll be in control. MTC is willing to let us do that. And I think we'll come back to the board on progress if we do get that allocation. I think it's a good partnership.
But, and I think also to add to that is that in the world we live in for federal funding, we've got to show a regional approach. So having MTC and others involved is really the only way to get it approved.
No, I'm just thinking, where I was leading with this.
Control.
You know, no offense, but in transportation, 12 million is,
Oh, it's nothing.
it's my house payment. You know what I mean?
That's right. But what you want is you want an investment.
Right.
Once you get the investment, then,
Then other things.
and you're successful with that investment, which hopefully we will be, based on our track record, we'll be able to ask for more money in the future.
Okay, I'm done. And then we have
Mr. Watts?
Mr. Watts.
Good morning. Happy to be here because I'm out of Sacramento. It is a very confusing week if you're following all the different things going on. Tomorrow is the deadline for bills to get out of House of Origin. The Senate's done a very good job. They've only got 30 bills left, so I think they'll be wrapped up today. The Assembly's got a few more because they always have about twice as many bills. And at the same time, the Budget Conference Committee is going on. So no matter what happens with the bills, the Budget Conference Committee met for the first time yesterday, made it most of the way through the process, through the different topics. I think they were just about to embark on transportation and resources, and then they'll wrap that up today. Then they'll go through another pass tomorrow, starting to work on the tough details. Overall, there's not much in conference that affects transportation. Both houses seem to have taken on uniformly. Probably the biggest lift that was proposed by the administration was to start funding and providing appropriations under SB1 for the various programs. And as a consequence, $1.5 billion was agreed to by both houses, and that's not in conference. And the lion's share of that is going for SHOP and local streets and roads, but there are allocations for other programs such as local partnership, trade programs, TRCP, the the Transit and Intercity Rail Program, and ATP. So they're getting up and running, and I'll speak in a moment about what the CTC is doing about their responsibilities to move forward to blend in with the appropriations. One issue was the capital outlay support, and that's still, even though it's been agreed to, I think PEG is still pushing for it. It was a pretty interesting approach because in the original budget in January, prior to SB1 being launched, the administration asked for a reduction in capital outlay support in recognition that TCRP, other programs, bond acts, and funding have been starting to shave down. So they're matching staff with the program levels, which was shrinking. About 250 PY reduction and some readjustments between programs. And then after SB1, their budget proposal in the May revise is essentially offset by an increase. So they're still going to reduce the legacy programs, but increase capital outlay support to match the new demands as a result of the new appropriations in SB1. So they come out of this, if it sticks, it'll stick at a net zero, but with some shuffling of positions between programs to make it all work. PEG is asking for, professional engineers is asking for some additional staff. They don't believe the Caltrans workload data, so that could pop up again, but right now it is not in conference. In addition, there were 4 trailer bills that are of strong interest. There's a trailer bill that will flesh out a trailer bill to correct some of the technical errors that were in SB1, minor references and like that, and such forth. But they also put in funding or corrected the approach for the local partnership program. When drafted in SB1, it referred to only counties that had taxing authority. Well, no county has transportation sales tax authority. Well, they all do, but it missed the mark. It was supposed to be targeted at RTPAs. So I pushed hard with the Senate staff, and they ended up convincing the administration to fix that in the trailer bill. And as a consequence, it looks like the local program, the local partnership program, will be directed at organizations like yours rather than at the counties. And then the CTC is also working on guidelines related to that. There was a bill that passed that benefited Riverside County, funded 5 projects. There's a trailer bill to give them additional procurement authority. For example, that trailer bill would increase Caltrans's ability to use CMGC as a procurement process by essentially doubling it, but they dedicate a couple of the slots, the new slots, which would amount to 24 now. 2 of those slots are relegated to RCTC to use in the implementation if they so choose on the projects that were in the SB 132. There's also local design build authority for 6 projects statewide for cities or counties to use, and 3 of those are reserved for the county of Riverside. And there's also local CMGC expansion so that not just expressways, but grade separations and bridge replacements would qualify at the local level for CMGC use. So it's a pretty innovative package. We're watching it closely, obviously. There's additional work on an advanced mitigation program, which a number of counties have used in the past with their NCCP and HCP programs. There's language that's been developed that will be placed into this trailer bill that reconciles how NCCPs and HCPs work within the advanced mitigation program. That had been a deep concern, and it took a long time to get folks to pay attention to that. So that's finally coming about. I was working very closely on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and the East County Fee Authority on their NCCP. So that should work out, I believe. There's also a trailer bill for freight, the freight program. So in SB 1, it just said there shall be a freight program, and here's the money for it. And this trailer bill is attempting to flesh it out. And there's a bit of controversy, but I don't think it's going to, I think it'll be worked out, and that is the Longshore Workers Union has asked for language that says you shouldn't use public money to put in autonomous equipment at the ports. The theory being you shouldn't use public money to put people out of jobs. They say they could still qualify and use those autonomous automatic processes, but just not with any of the state money. So that's going to be coming out. And finally, last, up popped in the final report by the Assembly last week an allocation of $3.5 million for Gomentum Station from the general fund. So I've dug into this. I've talked to the Speaker's Chief of Staff. I've talked to the Budget Chief. I've made myself available to Mr. Grayson's office because it turns out he's the one who made the request. If they need help, they feel comfortable right now. We'll see today. Today is the first day I think we'll actually address that issue. It's one of the very few items in the conference committee under Caltrans or transportation. And typically when they have something that one house has and the other doesn't, they'll hear it and pass on it. And at that point, we can go to work if that's the direction I would have, which I believe it would be to help them. Turning to bills, we've tracked before SB 595, the RM3 bill, and that bill did pass out yesterday, barely. It had 22 votes, but it's moving. It's still a shell in essence. So I think we'll see what Senator Bell's intent is once it gets into the Assembly. The other bill that we have taken a position on, AB 1444 by Catherine Baker, provides for it's a copycat approach to AB 1592 Bonilla, and it would authorize Dublin to use to operate a shared autonomous vehicle. They plan to use the small shuttle buses within Dublin to connect BART to parking lots. It passed out, and so she's doing a very, very good job pushing that forward. There was one bill that I was asked to bring to your attention. It's AB 1479. It deals with the Public Records Act, and the county clerks are trying to drum up opposition. The bill has passed through 3 committees on the floor with only 1 no vote out of all the votes they cast. So it's now moved on to the Senate. It essentially does two quick things. It requires every local entity to appoint a custodian of records, and they have to manage the system, and they are the direct point of contact. In addition, it authorizes a court of law to consider or to levy a fine if there's a challenge based on I forget the term, lack of due consideration, I guess, is for lack of a better phrase. And the intent was to bring it to your attention to see if you wanted to add that to the list of bills that you would take a position on. In this case, oppose. Moving on to the CTC, SB1 implementation is top of mind there. They have already started off at their most recent meeting setting out the guideline process for all the programs under SB1 that they're responsible for the guidelines for allocations. And as well, they've scheduled next week on Thursday and Friday a pretty comprehensive summit to walk all interested parties through all the different things that the CTC is planning to do, guidelines and otherwise, to accelerate and make sure that they're ready when the money starts to flow, when the taxes kick in November, and they can start making allocations as soon after that as possible. So that's my overview report, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to handle them.
Questions?
Can I make a comment on, so the there's 3.6 million, 3.5 million to Gomentum Station, correct?
Correct.
It's in the budget,
It's in the assembly budget
Right.
version.
so based on that, now we're starting to gain traction. I think the state understands the value of the test facility. And so what we decided to do is add an update. We're going to try to do this by fall of this year, is put this project in the strategic plan so you know exactly where the money's coming from, because we're going to get different types of money, how we budget for it. We'll bring amendments to you. That way you guys are informed of exactly what's happening, because if we get a federal allocation, now we're talking, we're going to get some more money. And so we want to make sure that we're transparent and we're doing this thing correctly. So the idea is the team here will put it in the strategic plan if that's the appropriate place. We'll we'll basically status it on a monthly basis. That way you'll get an update on what do we do that, Hisham?
Quarterly projects.
Quarterly. So you'll get a quarterly update on the progress. If you have any questions or we need to change direction, you can let us know. So that's kind of the plan, because we're getting a lot of interest. We answered questions from the Legislative Analyst Office. And so when you start answering those questions that they're pretty serious about some dollars.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with Tim and Habib yesterday about Gomentum, and one of the things I asked for was at a future APC meeting to get a bit of an overview about how things are working and what the resources are and what we're doing exactly, because we've never actually had that here. We've had the big summit, but not all of us have been able to go to that. But just kind of an overview, transparency, it's getting a lot of attention from others. It's probably better that we are able to answer the questions when it comes up in other venues. And so to be able to see that and see where the separate account is versus what we're doing and how that all works, I think is really a good idea. So, and frankly, it would be exciting to hear more about it and publicize it a little bit. The more the public can see, the better.
I guess the question for me that I want to ask, and I don't know who will answer it. This comes, explain to me, doesn't come out of a transportation fund, but it comes out of general fund? Could you explain to me? I know what I'm asking, but I'm not asking.
Yeah, let me address that. There are a couple places where we've sprinkled throughout the budget where members have asked for specific things. It typically happens in the natural resource areas, a little bit of flood control, some parks and all that. And they typically, for the first round of consideration, they use the general fund, even though the general fund is got some challenges. And I think in this case, the budget chair, once he was requested to add the project into the budget, figured, let's get this thing rolling, so let's put the general fund behind it. If at a later point in time in the conference committee it's got traction, we can either continue with general fund or we can shift to a different fund source. And I think I would just also posit that rather than immediately taking money out of SB1, which wouldn't be available till 6 months from now, you make a linkage and you start making a case for people who didn't like SB1 to say, look, they're already moving money around. So the general fund was an appropriate first step on this.
Good. Any other comments, questions?
I had a question on AB 1479, the Public Records Act fines and that kind of thing. Obviously, these City and County Clerks Association is opposed. We've got that letter in our packet. Has the league taken a position yet?
I haven't found a record that the league has. I do know that the rural not the rural counties, the urban counties have taken a opposed position early on, and others as well.
Yeah, I think this adds an incredible burden. We have spent so many hours and time and money trying to fulfill sometimes rather frivolous and vague requests. I know my local city has spent inordinate amounts of money, the equivalent of about a month worth of staff time trying to answer a request that was absolutely absurd for somebody's own personal benefit. And I think we ought to go ahead and take an opposed position. I would move that.
So we're recommending for this to go to the full board. That's what we're doing, right? Any comments before we call for the vote?
If I might, I could help out in this case as it goes to the full board by doing a little write-up so that I
Perfect.
recognize the
That'll
staff.
help us.
Yeah.
All right. Then I have a first and a second. Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? There you go. Is that it for you, sir?
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Fontes. Head back up, right? Not down. All right, going to regular agenda items again. Item 7, proposed budget for CCTA. Morning, Brian.
Good morning, Chair Taylor and Commissioners. I'm here today to talk about the proposed budget for fiscal year 17-18. Uh-oh, I did it already. There we go. Thank you. As we always present to you, we try and give you a summary, and then as we go through the slides, we try and break down all of the different funding sources and uses for the authority's budget. We always have the sales tax revenues, the federal, state, and local revenues, investments and other income, bond proceeds, and other sources. As we look, the sales tax revenues show a slight increase. We'll talk about that as we go through some of the slides as well. It's going to be up about 1.9%. The federal revenues are down 2.2%. State and local revenues are down as well. A lot of that is due to the timing of the CIP projects and one-time revenues in fiscal year 17. Investments and other income is up $255,000. That has to do with the slightly higher interest rates and the new bond that funded today that has interest income for next year as well. The projects, programs, and planning divisions, you can see some increases in the projects division as we work on some of the local authority municipality projects as well as some BART modernization projects as well. Planning section is down about $1 million as they finish some of the CTP allocation and work on that. The administrative section is down $1.3 million. And if you recall, we had the Measure X expense in last fiscal year, which was a one-time thing, so that would be almost 100% of that reduction there. Debt service is increasing about $1 million. Again, that follows with the funding of the new bond for next fiscal year. As we're driven off of the sales tax revenues, as you can see in prior fiscal years, we've had some higher increases. Our projection for the fiscal year 17 budget is about $84.8 million. That's a 1.6% increase. We know that we're going to be pretty close to meeting or exceeding that budget. And as we look to next year, we're looking to have about a 1.9% increase. The authority tries to be very conservative in putting out our sales tax revenues because all of our programs are driven off of this money, and what we want to do is not overcommit and have a lot of cities and different municipalities expecting to get higher revenues and not be able to meet those needs. Whenever we do receive more money than we have budgeted, it always does get reallocated to them in the future and true-up payments in the next fiscal year. Our sales tax revenues, as we're budgeting for next year, we only have 6 months of revenue for the point of sales transactions. The State Board of Equalization usually falls about 3 months behind. So probably in the next 2 weeks, I should have the final allocation so that I can, when I present this to the board, I'll have about 9 months of activity. As we looked at the first quarter of this fiscal year and comparing it to the prior year, we were up about 1.2%. The second quarter, is the holiday season. As we compare that to the prior year, we were up about 3.7%. So that nets out about 2.5% increase. One of the strongest sales tax sources for Contra Costa County is retail sales, which represent about 20%. New auto sales is up about 7%. That continues and has been the pattern for the last several years. Is one of the strong points. But as you can see in the far right-hand column, there's a good diversity of some of the top areas of where the money is. So if one of the economies go back a little bit, we're always going to have something that equals it out. That's been my experience here. This slide is just a general look back at the sales tax revenues, and it also shows the importance of the federal, state, and local revenues and how it works for the CIP projects. We all know the Caldecott Tunnel, the Highway 4. Most recently, we've had the San Pablo interchange. We now, as we look into next year, we can see a decrease from about $44 million down to about $24 million. I'll get into that as we move forward. But a lot of the projects have been completed and some of the funding phases have been utilized completely. So as we move forward into the future, we'll have other grants and federal revenues to help offset the expenditures that we have. This is a snapshot of what we kind of just looked at in the prior page is in regards to the funding sources. Our projected capital project revenues decreased about $17.7 million to $20.2 million. And this table represents just the Measure J, some of the Measure J, and Measure C has a little bit of revenue in there in the other category. So RM2, you can see the reduction from about 9.7 to about $4 million. The RM2 funds decreased about $6 million with the completion of phases for the Caldecott, which was about $3 million. SR4, there was a reduction of about $2 million. And then the I-80 San Pablo had about a $700,000 reduction, and the 680 Carpool was about $1 million. As we look at the STIP funds, we see a decrease of about $6.5 million. With the completion of the I-80 San Pablo Dam interchange improvements, that would be some of the funding decrease there. ECRFA has increased about $6.5 million. Mr. Taylor is Mayor Taylor is very happy about the Balfour and the $6.5 million going out there. And then our other funding category is a decrease of about $11.2 million. And as I mentioned earlier, there's one-time revenues that we saw last year. We sold a parcel on the Highway 4 project. That was about $3.4 million. And then we also had about $5.9 million of the TVTDV, the Tri-Valley Transportation Development Fund, funds for the I-80 aux lanes that we received that will be programmed as part of the budget this year through Measure C. As we talked about the bonds earlier, we also have the other funding sources that helps accumulate and pay off some of these projects. This takes just the CIP projects category, CIP 1 through 9. As you look at the capital projects, we have about $60 million in funding. We just discussed about $20 million of funding, and this shows the different funding groups and where the funding sources are going for the projects. And then on the bottom right-hand column, you can see the bond proceeds is going to be about $40 million. So of the $100 million that funded today, we're going to use about $40 million next year based on the current projections for the phases. The other funding category in there, you can see the East County, that's the Balfour Road interchange. We're going to get about $9.5 million there. And as you can see on the I-680 corridor, we have some RM2 and BATA funding as well. And then other sources is a large number that we showed on the summary. It's about $32 million. This is money that's been collected in prior fiscal years that is used for the timing of these projects. And you go down on the far left-hand side, or the left-hand side is the percentage breakdown for each of the categories per the strategic plan. Then we take the sales tax revenues and we allocate the funds. And then we also have external revenue. So in the capital projects, you can see that we have about $60 million in there. 40 of that is made up of the bond proceeds. And then we have $20 million as part of the federal, state, and local contributions. And then we have our expenditures per group. So you can see in the capital projects division, we have a program reserved of using about $23 million. There is the PED bike. We also have the TLC programs that we work with the individual cities. We don't use the bond proceeds for those. We use the cash on hand that we have accumulated over the years. So you can see there's a drawdown of about $23 million. And then part of the other funding sources is we still have some Measure C funds, and we are planning to use about $11.2 million next fiscal year. The revenues in there is about $551,000. And you can see that we have a $400,000 potential land sale as part of one of the CIP projects on Highway 4 that would go back to Measure C that funded it. And then we also have some interest earnings in there as well.
Could I ask a question? I'm
Sure.
sorry to interrupt you.
Please.
On the Measure C, when is that ever going to run out?
So we stopped collecting Measure C in April 1st, 2009. But however, there is like 3 projects remaining that are ongoing. One of them is 684, and we're using the money, and that's the biggest one that we have. We have about $11 million in there programmed, and we're using it for utility relocations and right-of-way phases. So the board basically had a policy that we will try to close Measure C by June 30th, 2018. We're giving the sponsors until June 30th, 2018 to expend their funding. If they can't, then they have to come and ask for an extension from the authority. But there is like 3 projects left, one in Concord, one in Danville, and 684 interchange.
What's the balance in the account?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think a year ago it was about 24 million. I don't know the exact balance at this point.
So this,
Approximately, it's about $21 million as of our March financials that we just provided you last month.
so we'll have, after this allocation, we'll have $10 million that we still got to spend before June, but it's not being shown to be budgeted this year? Yeah, but if it's going to be done by 2018, it's that the fiscal year we're talking about. It's, in other words, it has to be done, the 21 million, but we're only showing spending 11 million of that.
So we're expecting somebody would come with an extension request. And there is also, we have put money in reserve. There's about $4 million that we would need to decide whether to roll it into Measure J reserve or do something else with it. So we will be back to the authority towards the end of this fiscal year by June 30th, 2018, I guess.
Okay. It'd be good just to be, I think we all want to know, we got a commitment, let's see what we can do to stay on that, and if not, let's make a one-time decision and finish it.
Thank you. This slide here is our proposed expenditures for all of the different categories is $184.5 million. The project expenditures for Measure C and Measure J increased about $2.3 million. We just discussed Measure C. And this table represents just the Measure J projects and all of the capital expenditures that we have in there. And what I try and do is illustrate on this table is the changes on the projects. As you all know, there's a lot of timing that's associated with the different phases in here, and there's also a lot of work and a lot of budgeting that we do as we get down to the sub-regional projects with the cities, as well as our local BART agency, which is the bottom row. There's a lot of modernization projects that are going on in Concord, El Cerrito, the Del Norte station, and some of the other ones as well. That represents a lot of the increases from just 3.3 million to 14.7 million. And with the completion of these, it'll utilize some of the funding sources that we've reserved over the years. And once those are done, we'll have other allocations that are done through the strategic plan as well. And then the major sub-regional streets improvements was SPP 24, was 8.8 down to 6.5, and the majority of projects in that $6.6 million there is the City of Concord is going to be utilizing approximately $3.3 million for the Farm Bureau Road Safe Routes to School project, and then also $2.1 million for the City of Martinez for the Alhambra Creek construction project. One of the items we always try and do is keep our administrative costs down. We already talked about the decrease of $1.3 million related to the Measure X expense for last fiscal year. And then our salaries and benefits, as we continue to talk about, are always capped at 1% of our sales tax revenue. As our sales tax revenues have increased over the years, some of our salaries and benefits costs have increased as well, and they've always continued to stay at around 80%, 81%. So we're doing very well in that area. The pension and post-employment rates, CalPERS comes out every year with a 2-year projection of what our costs will be. It's 0.1% of increase for next year for CalPERS for the pension cost. So that's factored into the budget as well. The programs division has seen a decrease of $4.5 million. A lot of that is due to the timing of some of the projects and allocation of funds that we've had. The local and street maintenance that goes to all of the counties is $17.4 million. So we tend to send out that money throughout the year based off of the completion of their tasks on their side. The planning division shows a decrease of $1 million. We talked about the costs, the one-time costs of the public outreach, the tax expenditure plan, and priority development area. We had the grants from MTC to go out and work with the cities. That has decreased about $500,000 as well as that starts to wind down. The debt service has increased about $1 million. Again, that's due to the 2017 bond proceeds. So that concludes my presentation for the day, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and also want to extend a thank you to Susan and the projects team for their extensive work in putting together the large portion of the work and working with all their consultants to help this run smoothly.
I'm going to start with a question, if I may. We paid in advance with the CalPERS, but CalPERS now is not going to be what they said originally, obviously.
That's right.
How's that going to hit us?
Just first of all, let me just thank Brian and the staff for a fine job with preparing the budget. And to your question, we've been able to contain our pension costs. As you recall, the board has made decisions to pre-fund our pension obligations, and we're starting to see, the benefit in that by reductions in our, or I won't say reductions, but softer hits in our budget as a result of those prepayments. So we're able to offset those policy changes you're talking about at the CalPERS board that will impact future rates. I think we made a very wise decision to pre-fund those obligations, and it's really helped insulate us from some of those decisions.
So, wise decision, but I guess what I'm asking, how's that going to impact us in the oncoming budget? How? Because we're going to get hit. We have to. They're going to.
Yeah. So we factored in the changes CalPERS has made in their discount rate, and I believe that's the point that you're making, is that there have been policy changes, and those will have increase impacts on public agencies. When you look at how it impacts the authority, it's less than 2% a year, which is less than what you're probably experiencing in other public agencies, largely in part because we pre-funded our pension obligation to a significant degree. So less of an impact for us than perhaps you're seeing elsewhere.
I can guarantee you some of the cities are going to really get smacked. Julie.
Yeah, I just want to thank our finance staff for their foresight. Obviously, when we went after Measure J, not knowing whether it would pass or not, and that Measure C was going to expire, we positioned ourselves to be able to be paid up in full at that time. And obviously, too, the pre-funding has made a big difference. As I meet on different boards and talk about this conundrum for many of them, I think it would be helpful to resurrect those reports that we did, talking about how we positioned ourselves and why and how we went about it and the advantages of the pre-funding. I think several of our agencies could benefit from seeing what we did and sort of the mechanics of how that works. The interest rate at PERS is certainly better than what we can get in almost any other investment that we're allowed to invest in anyway. And so I think sharing that experience might be helpful for some of our other agencies. I know that means you have to pull up some of the past reports maybe and consolidate them, but I think that could be really, really helpful.
We certainly can do that.
I too, Brian and everyone, Randy, great job on this. We've seen since 2011 a 33% increase in sales tax. I mean, it's a strong, we're fortunate to be in this county, and the future still looks good. And I think we've moderated our expenses and how we approach things, and we control our cost well. So I think we're doing a fantastic job, and I think we're really pretty transparent about everything that we do. Just an FYI, not to dwell on it because we are in good shape, but I sit on the statewide committee on governance, transparency, and pensions. So CalPERS is at every one of our meetings. All cities have to do is listen to CalPERS because the staff has been telling the truth. It's their governing board that actually denies everything that they hear. But really the answer to the question is there's nothing in the report. It's just math. When you have an agency that collects money for you, an investment, and says they're going to get a rate of return of whatever it is, if you prepay, they credit you that rate of return.
That's exactly right.
So it is the best investment because your money in your portfolio is running barely 1.5% to 2%. And if they're going to give you credit on an investment return of 7 from 7.25, guess what, folks? That's your best investment you can find, bar none. You'll make 3 times what you are in Europe. So it actually begs the question, even though it's 0.1%, which is pretty negligible. We had to find out, Randy, what the real, in real dollars, the amount is, because truthfully, again, from a budgeting point of view, we should always stay ahead of it, because even our portfolio, we're not even hitting barely 2%. So that's the simple lesson.
Absolutely.
Put the money in your pensions where you owe it, and quit complaining, and it's your best investment. And not doing it is just insane. And so I think our agency, again, Randy's leadership and everybody here has had great foresight, and the board agreed unanimously to do this, to pre-fund that. And that's why we're not seeing changes in our annual rates. We're staying barely at inflation. So, in that way, I think we're doing a great job. But bottom line, it's just math. It's not complicated. And everybody wants to deny what that is. And it's amazing, on the committee, which has 50-something people on it, I'd say 80 to 85% want to deny what they hear and make excuses. So kudos to everybody here. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think the reason I'm asking for this sort of synopsis of what we did and why and the outcome is because you try to explain this in another board, and they just sort of scratch their head and go, okay, we'll just go on the way we've always done it. And many of our agencies have a little bit, because the economy's been good, that we could use to pay toward a pre-funding, even if not pay off the pre-funding, and all of that. You could at least advance it, and that's probably, as Newell says, the best investment any of our agencies can make toward the future, not to mention that we're making life a whole lot more secure for our current employees and our retirees. It just relieves the anxiety. So, good job.
I would like to I took this information back when we did it to Brentwood, and we are seriously looking into it. And I was told by Carrier Pigeon that you should call Carrie. So that might be something to...
I hate to tell you, but I stole all this information from Brentwood when I came. I learned how to do that there, and I'm not trying to say that, but between Carrie and Pam, you know that they set up rate stabilization funds, and they created these side funds to help pay for this. But we're an agency of 20 versus 300 people, so it's a little different.
But we're about ready to really embark on that through. I'd like to say through your training by us. We appreciate this. The other issue, again, I think you always do a magnificent job, and you really got it down to the nuts and bolts. So when you present it to the full board, it's pretty understandable. Am I right? No, you're pretty much done.
I think this is a great agency, and as Brian just highlighted, the numbers don't bespeak how small we are, because the numbers make us look like a big agency, and we have 20 employees. So it's a pretty extraordinary job. And with a 3.5% increase just on our labor cost, this is really a well-managed agency. And with that, I would move that we recommend this to the full board.
Second.
Have a first, have a second. Is there any more discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very good. 8-0, amendment number 3 to agreement number 435, Stantec Consulting.
Mr. Chairman, I'll handle this item. At your February meeting, you authorized staff to negotiate a one-year extension to the Stantec contract, which is set to expire by the end of this month. Staff has completed its negotiations with Stantec and is seeking your approval to execute Amendment 3 to Agreement Number 435. The amendment amount is approximately $4.416 million, of which $1.4 million is to continue the ongoing activities for our TDM and Safe Routes to School programs, which we took over from Transvac in July 2016. The remaining amount is for projects and program management activities. Approximately $526,000 in TFCA funds will be used to fund this amendment, while the rest of the contract will be funded with Measure J funds. In the next year, we expect to get additional assistance in our construction program and construction activities from Stantec. We will get an additional oversight for CCTA administered construction projects, including State Route 4 Balfour, which is under construction, I-684, which is expected to be advertised in March of next year, the I-680 Express Lanes, which is design is nearing completion, as well as I-80 Central Avenue, which will be in construction hopefully this summer. Update, we also will use Stantec's helps in the update of the construction contract administration guide and the construction specifications. We will get support of construction management related initiatives such as the e-bidding, the use of unmanned aerial systems, as well as the paperless construction management. At the request of Commissioner Newell at the February APC meeting, we prepared attachment B to the staff report, which highlights the major milestones that Stantec helped us achieve during the past couple of years. And I just want to note that there is, in this contract amendment, there is no increase in funding to this shared autonomous vehicles program or task. We expect to come back with an amendment to that contract if we secure additional funding for that task. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Hishan. Great job. And Stantec, I think, has been doing a great job, and it's great to have Habib as a partner helping our agency. But from the 19-city perspective, which is the seat I sit in, I just want to make sure we're really transparent about one area, the TDM 511 program, in terms of the funding. That this is a task that is not the agency's responsibility. It's one that the agency has funding that goes towards it based on fair share allocation. And because it was run by an independent entity that we, as the board, approved funding for, then we moved it over to Stantec to manage it. It now looks like on the work description that says, as part of this year's task, is to move the 511 function to this agency. So I just want to make sure that, since the other two regions handle their own, that we are separate, that we are not mixing the agency with those sort of RTP functions, and that the cost accounting is absolutely transparent, because you can't do the math easily in this to say, because you have to go to a separate budget. It should say, here's the allocation based on Measure J for these two entities, and here's the allocation that's being there. We see the allocation, the cost, but I don't know that that is compared to what's allocated. So I think that we ought to put in here and be real transparent about it. And I'm sure it matches, but I think our oversight is, even though my friend Julie is sitting here, we want to make sure, as the representing the rest of us, that it's being done in a transparent way that makes sure that there are no additional funds being mistakenly allocated towards that. And then what is the plan, how's it being paid for, and how do other agencies participate by moving the 511 agency or task back to our agency?
So regarding your first point, it's a point well taken. One of the reasons we delayed this amendment until this month is we wanted the board to allocate the TDM program money to the different subregions, and that was done at the last board meeting. And thank you, Peter. Peter will take it from here.
Yeah, I just want to, I understand that. I just want to see in this document, so that if somebody looks at this as we're approving this contract and we're spending that money for those two entities, that it says right next to there, and the allocation by board approval is, and put that amount of money. That way we don't have to look one after the other, and that way that's my transparency issue. I don't have any issue with it, just want to see it there so we know that, yep, we're right on budget. And then the other one was about why are we moving the 511? Why is that being proposed to move it back to, or not move it back, put it in our agency hand versus?
Well, I think the reason it's under our agency is so there's some board oversight, which was one of the potential issues with Transpac because it wasn't officially at that time a JPA. And then the whole Pleasant Hill, kind of thing. We do still continue to take the work program and budget to Transpac and Transplan, so they still have oversight of the programs that go on within their RTPCs. And then we can certainly, put more information in the document you're talking about that shows the allocation and refer back to the funding resolution that you made that shows the split of the funds and how they went to the three separate entities representing 4 RTPCs. So.
Commissioners, let me add a little bit to that. So when I first got here 7 years, 1 month, and 15 days ago, now 16 maybe now, I asked the question, why don't we run the 511 Contra Costa program? Because it's a countywide program, and they said don't talk about that. It's a political issue. Don't even mention about it. So 5 years and some odd days later, they come, a contingent of board members come into my office and said, you need to figure out a way of taking over the 511 Contra Costa for the Transplan and Transpac area. Ignored it. It's a political issue. And they came back again, and then again. And so we absorbed that. And I think that all the subregions have to do is say to CCTA board is we want you to handle that. We like the results that we see. That's it. And then we'll do the mechanical aspects of bringing it on board. One of the things that worried us is that, we're very diverse in the areas and our needs, but we wanted to make sure that it's a great start for us at a staff level is to try dealing with that issue out in East County and Central County. And so I think it's working. We're still new. We'll make sure that we have all the information to make sure that we're not allocating dollars that should have gone to SWAT out into Transpac or the East County Transplan. But interesting comment on this is that one of the first things I told Commissioner Katzen was, now you're making comments on somebody else's 511 program from your seat as a commissioner, because in the days of old, you didn't have any, you couldn't make those comments because they were done by a different governing body. So that's one of the ramifications. But I think, and I was going to talk about this afterwards, I'm pretty proud of Peter and the team, is we've just announced a big partnership with a company called Scoop, a startup called Scoop. And there's $30,000 allocated, $2 incentive to carpool. Scoop does all the background checks. They do all the work. What we do is we provide those dollars for 15,000 carpool rides over a 3-month period. And so either the money runs out first or the carpool program ends as a pilot. We think these things we're pretty well positioned because of our innovation program, where these startup companies are coming in and they're bringing us these bright ideas, good ideas to try out. And so that's another, I think, advantage of having maybe us run that program.
And I see some great advantage. I guess, again, the 19-city perspective, maybe it's worth us having a conversation, because the politics behind it was really about regionalism and wanting each agency to, each of the 4 areas, do what they wanted. Use the money within the criteria, but make their own decisions and not have to, quote, come to the board and have a staff say, well, this is the criteria I came up with, and it doesn't meet the local community's needs. So it, for years, worked that way. But when we bring it in-house and we start having those discussions, then we're kind of, however you want to cut it, we're using the agency's resources for half the county. And it's not at the same level as we might see. So it might be worth having a discussion with the other two standalone entities on this. Is there value, or find some way to create some parity? But I just think it's worth a discussion because it is a change. And it will involve, like we're spending time talking about it, but we're not talking the details. We're talking the governance aspect and transparency. That I think maybe we ought to have that discussion because we haven't had it as a board. Do our other two agencies, Westpac and SWAT, thank you, want to revisit? Not suggesting that there's any discussion about that, but we ought to allow the opportunity to have that discussion and talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and maybe there is start to become some sharing at some level so that it has greater value to the whole board and the whole county, that some of those tasks may be county-wide tasks. So I think that's my point.
Just one more thing to add. First of all, you talked about how everybody's working together, and we still meet monthly. The first Wednesday of the month in the morning, the three offices get together and talk about programs and what's going on. And then you approved an allocation last year. It's taken us a little while to get the scope of work together. It's gone through the RTPCs for a countywide strategic plan with the TDM program. And one of the tasks in there is to kind of look at the makeup of this whole thing. So that'll generate some of this discussion you're talking about. So I think you'll see some of that coming forward.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, TransPAC certainly and Transplant as well have had an opportunity to see this program of services and things. We got our input into the whole project before we approved it at that level. And certainly we're still getting the same money, not additional money, that we would have had were we running it ourselves. What we gain, I think, is the expertise and the level of ability to look beyond what we've sort of always done to things that might advance where we are. And frankly, I think it's probably making the money go further, even though we're probably paying a higher rate for that expertise, we're actually getting more out of it. And so we're not getting any more than we got before, because it's actually money that comes to CCTA from TFCA and other sources. Then we were shipping it out to the subregions. Now it's not having to be shipped out. It's just being that subset for those two regions is staying with this contract. And I think, frankly, we're getting a higher level of service than we were able to before. So I'm excited about having a further discussion and seeing how we can build upon what we need in each of the regions and blend that on a comprehensive level. I think that's a good conversation to have.
So I guess the question comes, we're going to put this in some type of purification process of letting people know what's going on in the sense of how it's working? Is that where I'm at with this? Peter, somebody?
Well, I'd make a recommendation that we recommend to move forward with this, and the only change I was asking for is just we clearly just to add the financial notes there as an asterisk and a footnote and saying this was allocated, this matches that in the story. The rest of it is just a long discussion to the future of how to bring it back to the board separately, nothing to do with Stantec's contract. But I would move the item with that change.
I have a first and I have a second. Any more discussion? Tom, you look like you want to say something. Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Looks like we're going to item 9. Approval 2018 State Transportation Improvement STIP process.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Hugh, Associate Engineer with the Authority. This is an action item that needs your action and approval. The 2018 STIP process has begun, and project priorities are due to MTC in October. In order to meet the schedule, staff recommends issuing a call for project on June 22nd after the Authority's approval of the STIP process at the June Authority meeting. As you may know, the STIP is updated every 2 years, adding 2 years to the prior programming commitment. The 2018 STIP will add programming of funds for fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. Per MTC's estimates, we anticipate the funding to be between $20 and $25 million for Contra Costa. We won't know the exact amount until the CTC approves the fund estimate in August, and you may recall that the 2016 STIP had a fund estimate of negative $754 million because of declining gas prices. And as a result, the authority deleted $13.4 million from the 2016 STIP by removing the BART modernization project. If funding is available in the 2018 STIP, $13.4 million will be reprogrammed back to the project off the top. And also, per the 2016 Measure J strategic plan, the East County is precluded from competing for the 2018 STIP funds in return for dedicating the authority's 2015 bond proceeds to the EBOT project. Staff took the screening and scoring criteria to TCC for their review last month. They did not make any changes to the criteria and recommended issuing the call for projects. The tentative schedule for the 2018 STIP is shown in Attachment A of the staff report. The applications are due on July 28th. An evaluation subcommittee formed through the TCC will review the projects in August, and staff will bring back the ranked project list to the APC and Authority Board for approval in September. The approved project list will then be sent to MTC in October. So staff requests your approval of the 2018 STIP process and to issue the call for project after the June Authority meeting. And with that, we'll take any questions that you may have.
Questions?
Just thank you, Stephanie. It's nice to see you here, too.
Thank
You're
you.
always precise and well presented.
Thanks.
How's the attendance for the TCC? Are we seeing all of our staff show up pretty regularly?
Yeah, I think also lately, with particularly the OBAG action and the STIP items, they've been very active in participating in the TCC.
So as you said, there was no other changes recommended by them, so.
No, we've used this criteria for the past few cycles, so it's pretty standard. They didn't have any concerns or questions.
And that's good. I just kind of want to know, sitting up here, to make sure we're not leaving somebody out of the conversation who couldn't make the meeting or something. And in the packet, there is, you can see the new forms that are in there, but then there's some scanned forms that are, I'm looking for, backing up here, and they're the table pack for roadway pack. So is that in addition, that needs to be filled out?
No, the tables are used by the evaluation committee to kind of score each project. For example, the category of safety and system productivity. They read through the application and, determine what scores will be given to that.
That's what I was trying to read it. So everything, the other forms for the categories are for the applicants to fill out, and then the scoring teams. So you're presenting this so it's transparent, so everybody knows.
Correct. We're just trying to show how the scores will be done. The scoring will be done.
Excellent. I'd move the item.
Thank you.
The points, the point allocation on this, it says it's the same as the prior STIP process. I would like to see the meeting SB 375 goals get higher, get more points than 10. I don't know, how that decision was made, but
to change the weighting of the criteria, if that's what the board wants. This is what we used in the last STIP cycle, and I think that criteria didn't exist at all before that. So we added it in the prior STIP cycles to address SB 375. If the board wishes to increase it, they can do that. We just need to know where to take it, what other criteria to reduce weighting on.
well, I would like to see it increased. I'm not sure to what. I don't know how the rest of you feel about it, but.
Well, I can give you another perspective is since all of us have our general plans and we have a specific area deals with this. The reason that it doesn't want to go higher in this is because in order to meet SB 375, some cities, for example, one of the ones I represent, doesn't need to do any of this at all to meet 375. In fact, will far exceed it by other measures. So we need to make sure that it does do something towards it, but we don't want to weigh it too heavily because there's a lot better things you can do. Is getting people out of your cars versus doing a project that may fix a road or something. So I think this was a balance to acknowledge that some cities don't have to do this, don't need to build roads or modify roads to meet SB 375. So that's the flip side.
Well, so, but it seems like some projects would get points on that anyway. I mean, if you're gonna build a road and it's gonna provide congestion relief, but it's also gonna be a complete streets project, you'd get points both places. But it would, again, it just seems, 10 points is paltry compared to where we are in public policy today in California. I don't see a lot of sympathy here, though.
Well, I think it's a balance, and while meeting the SB 375 goals is really important, these other items are too. I mean, certainly safety and system productivity are important, congestion relief, strategic expansion, having a local match is important. I don't know what you would cut. Would you cut whether it's a Measure C or Measure J project in that number of points? I mean, we're talking about where we're using our funds. So I think on balance, this is a good strategy. If I understood correctly, it's not just the TCC that has to approve it, but the CTC, right? No, just us. Okay. I'm happy with it the way it is.
What does system productivity mean?
So, go ahead. I was just looking at the productivity table, table D on page 9-23. So it weighs in truck volumes or on the roadway or the arterial or the traffic flow or efficiency of the roadway. So that's where the scores will be coming from, or how you determine the scores.
How would system productivity differ from congestion relief?
It's related to freight, most importantly on the roadway side, but on the transit side, it also relates to like track improvements, revenue collection, and so on. So how much you can get from the system, that's what it really means.
Well, okay. It just seems to me there's too much emphasis on moving traffic and not enough emphasis on other goals.
Commissioners, I agree with all of you. And this goes to my thesis of, we're stuck doing today's work, but the STIP funds projects out into the future. And so where you're headed, Commissioner Butt, is probably very, very astute as far as the long-range plan. We need to get to a certain location when these guidelines no longer are valid because the roads are operating better, because we have better technology, all those kinds of things. Keep in mind that the STIP, and I'll give an example, we're looking at the funding allocation for 684 Phase 3. There's about $35 million in it from Measure J. There's about $15 million from the STIP. And it's a $100 million construction project. This is nothing is funded 100% by the STIP anymore. You're talking about a small percentage, in this case, 100 million, so you got 15, so 15% of your allocation comes from the STIP, and it's multi-year, and we've aggregated it into 1 year of the STIP. And so I think you brought up a great point, in my opinion, being staff, not being a board member, but think about the future and how these criteria may change based on the way we allocate funds, whether or not we pass another measure, all those kinds of issues, and then have that conversation again, because I think it's a valid question. It may not work today, but keep in mind, this is so you got $25 million. Is that what our?
20 to 25, but then we have to give back 13.4
Yeah, so
to
13's coming off the top. So you're talking about 12 over a 5-year STIP, correct? 12 million over 5 years. And we've got a lot of needs that are very expensive. And so when you take 12 million, you sprinkle 12 million over a half a dozen projects, it's not much. It's not much.
I would second Newell's motion.
So, Tom, are you finished?
No, I'm going to vote no on it.
Oh, okay.
I think today is the future.
All right. Well, I have a first and I have a second. Any more discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Thank you, by the way. You are very precise and direct and to the point and all the above. I totally agree with you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Correspondence, news clippings. Commissioners, staff reports. I have nothing. Commissioners? Tom? No, cut your light out.
I would just make
sorry.
one comment. Next week, I will be attending the National Association of Regional Councils meeting. CalCog is the host, and that is the link here to this agency. We are the host for the national convention, which will be taking place in Monterey. And so as your CalCog representative, I will be there to welcome those folks from all over the country to hear about what we do. And going to be an exciting one. I'm going as ABAG's representative, so they're paying the bill. But I'm indirectly representing CalCog at ABAG's expense.
Is that on the record?
Is that pretty cool?
That's pretty cool. All right. Executive staff comments?
Commissioners, thank you, Commissioner Arnovich, for spending time out of your day to collect this trophy. But this is the International Partnering Institute Partnering Champion Award. So this is the highest award that they have to offer. Is that correct, Ivan? That's correct. It's the highest, yeah, the highest. So Ivan was there as well, and it's really, I don't know what this saves us as far as bids, but when you're an owner of choice, and I can't explain what the percentage is, contractors bid risk, and so if you have less risk, you get better bids. So I'm not really sure, but this is how much this box has saved all of us, but it saved us a little bit of money. So thank you for being there. Appreciate that.
So what is it?
It's the International Partnering Institute.
What is the symbol in
Handshake. It's a two hand shaking, partnering. So we got this for partnering, international partnering. So, we've taken the arbitration spec out of the contract and we've implemented partnering, formal partnering. So we have a dispute resolution ladder. We're trying to deal with the issues at the field level or mid-level, ultimately to the owner level, or we go to court. We don't do any waste time going to dispute resolution boards or arbitration. We we haven't had a claim yet.
We're going to show that at the board meeting?
Sure.
And maybe we can have it represented up there or something. When you walk in, and it'll become a conversation piece.
Okay.
Hey, and Newell, so how was the reception, Newell? Can you give a report on that?
Well, I got to actually, with Hujan's help, to actually do a kind of an acceptance. And our agency is really well known. And this is a international, but primarily those that were there were from the U.S. Had two very large construction companies come up to us, and one in particular talked my ear off. They want to work for us because they know if they work for us, they have great staff support, and that they'll get projects done on time. They're not going to be in litigation, and they realize they'll make money with us, and in turn, our taxpayers are getting a great deal for their money, that we don't waste public resources. And I think it really is, it's not us as the board, other than the fact we support our staff. It's really credit to our staff and to our consulting teams that we carefully select. That puts us, as Randy just said, we're an agency of choice. People want to work with us. And those that have not done well in their bids realize they just need to sharpen their pencils because they will make money. Because they have a fear factor. They work with, I'm not going to name the other agencies, but they work with other agencies. They're adding 10, 20, 25% more in those bids because of that agency. So I think that is really huge for us. And I think while it's just a symbolic award, I think it really goes to why our bonds sold so well at such great rates. It's throughout the agency, great leadership, and I think a board that appreciates that too.
I forgot to mention, we just got a check for how much? $100,278,000, something like that. It came in this morning. How much was it?
Yeah, that's right. This morning, about 8:05, we closed the 2017 Series A bond transaction. So we're $100 million more in the bank today than we were yesterday. We'll work hard to put that money to work in the ground, get these projects done. At 2.706%.
That's incredible. Did you write that down, Brian? Let Brentwood know. That was a heck of a job. Timing is everything. Yes, sir.
Do we have any scheduling issues for next month? So July 4th is on a Tuesday, PC is Wednesday evening, and then APC is Thursday, which would be the 6th. So everybody, no problems? We'll have a quorum on the 6th of July, being July 4th week? Okay.
Most of us try to be in town for the 4th of July.
I remember last year we moved it. Remember we moved the meeting.
I won't like it, but I just got voted down. I really like Tom. Nobody showed me interest. Thanks a lot.
Go to your cabin.
I go to my cabin and drive back just to meet with everybody. Okay. Oh, thank you. Any other business? Okay, we'll adjourn until, unfortunately, July 6th. Thank you.